Hello and welcome to Catch News. I am here today with Ambassador Kanwal Sibal, former Foreign Secretary of India and one of our most eminent diplomats. I'll be discussing with him US President-elect Donald Trump's attitude to China and the possible fallout of that attitude for India. Let me ask you this, Ambassador Sibal. Why do you think China has chosen to describe Donald Trump as a diplomatic rookie and a naive person when it comes to diplomacy?
Well, in effect, what they're saying is not wrong, because he's got a business background. He never held any government position. He's not been involved in traditional forms of diplomacy. He's been a businessman. Finer aspects of diplomacy are still a bit foreign to him, if you like, ringing up or receiving the telephone call from the president of Taiwan, accepting her congratulations, which has not been done since 1979. And this was a big departure in terms of...
and the tweets
And the tweets. So that big departure from established US policy has been noted very adversely by the mainstream media and by other political circles in the United States, because they fear that through these ill thought out initiatives, he is creating complications in US-China relationship. But he has reacted very sharply to that. From a common sense point of view, what he says is not wrong. He's saying that, look, if we can sell billions of dollars worth of arms to Taiwan, so what's the problem in my receiving a call of congratulations from her?
Yes.
But then when he was criticized even more for this by the mainstream media and the political class, he then came back with a tweet, which actually is very significant. Because if his initial reaction was impulsive, and the wiser counsel may have prevailed later, because his advisors and others would have told him that let's not roil up the US-China relationship even before you assume power, because once you are in that seat, then you will have to calibrate.
What does the new tweet say?
The new tweet says that China has deliberately devalued its currency in order to hurt the economic interests of the United States. They have imposed restrictions on US exports, whereas we are not putting any. And then he said they have militarized the disputed South China Sea region. Now, this means, in fact, that he's enlarged the scope of his differences with China by mentioning very specifically the South China Sea
But he had
dispute.
mentioned this earlier also. Even during the campaign, he had said he would designate China as a currency manipulator.
True.
That he would take action against them on trade issues unless they renegotiated them. So it's not as if he's saying something new. He was a disruptor then and he's a disruptor now.
That was only on the economic side. But now when he brought in the South China Sea issues, this is actually bringing into the whole area of differences with China a factor which earlier he had not pinpointed. And this has nothing to do with his talk with the Taiwanese president. So, but in that context, he is mentioned. Now, this also means, therefore, that earlier feelings that on the issue of the Asia pivot of the United States, he may be lukewarm. Now, thinking would have to be revised, because if he's mentioning South Sea China disputes, which means that the pivot is very much on his mind. Absolutely. And checkmating Chinese expansionism in this area.
Yeah. You know, we all know that the Chinese often say things through their official media, which they cannot say diplomatically, because there you don't have to maintain diplomatic niceties. So why has China chosen to warn Donald Trump through its official media not to cross it on issues of trade and Taiwan? A front page opinion piece in the overseas edition of People's Daily, for example, says provoking friction and messing up China-US relations won't help make America great again. Now this is pretty strong, and People's Daily is the official organ of the Chinese Communist Party.
I would say, in fact, that this betrays a lot of nervousness on the part of China. They really don't know how to handle this. And at the official level, they are discreet, because they don't want to up the ante, because they don't have many instruments in their hands to challenge the United States of America in any serious way. So they're putting out these messages through the People's Daily or through newspapers, Global Times, which reflect perhaps thinking at official level. But there, if you look at Chinese statements on some of the differences between them and United States, they're even stronger than this. This is the usual way of China blowing up steam for domestic purposes, that they are standing up. I don't think that one need to take this too seriously.
Okay. Now let's talk about this 10-minute phone call that Donald Trump had with the president of Taiwan, breaking 40 years of protocol. Do you think this is being seen by China as US diluting its commitment to one China policy?
Well, two things. One is that the White House has reaffirmed with the one China policy.
But this is the
current
White House
administration. And this is based on the agreement that the two sides have. I don't think that he will question the one China policy because under that one China policy, United States has room not only to say that they will defend Taiwan if Taiwan is attacked, but continue to supply arms and in very substantial amounts to Taiwan. So we'll continue to do that.
But
now,
you do not see it as a potential threat. That the US is saying that if you continue with currency manipulation, you continue with aggression in South China Sea, you refuse to control the nuclear ambitions of North Korea, then a time may come where you may force us to recognize Taiwan.
No, I don't think so. I don't think so because recognition of Taiwan might hurt China's ego and China's political stature and create huge embarrassment for China domestically, and perhaps run the risk of China, as they did in the past, undertaking major military exercises in the Taiwan Straits, etc., etc. They might be obliged to do that. But beyond that, I don't think that this is going to affect very much China as such, because it's a very sensitive issue for China, all right. But there are other issues which other countries have which are equally sensitive. What I mean to say is that China doesn't have a military option. And on the economic side, in fact, their whole growth, their OBOR and all these, it needs an open economy, it needs open markets. So if actually United States starts putting economic pressure on China, and in a situation where China's economy is slowing down, I think it'll put enormous pressure on China. Yes, there might be a cost to pay insofar as the United States is concerned, but I don't think that what China can do is that critical to the United States economy than the reverse.
Okay. Now let's talk about something else. Do you agree with the Chinese media's analysis that Indo-US relations may become an important part of President-elect Donald Trump's diplomacy to suppress China? Suppress in quotes is what they have said. But they've also said that any such attempt would have a limited impact. Do you agree with this?
Yes, I think so. Because first of all, we are not interested in entering into a conflict with China. We are simply hedging ourselves against China's expansionism in the Indian Ocean and potential problems that may cause us strategically by strengthening relationship with neighbors, creating all these ports, creating all these potential naval bases around us, beginning with Gwadar and Hambantota and things like that, which may not become a naval base because it will be too risky for Sri Lanka, but certainly Gwadar. But I don't think that we are going to team up with the United States to confront China, because we can never be certain how far the United States will go to confront China, because there are certain realities on the ground.
Surely the Trump administration also knows this, and so do the Chinese. So therefore the Chinese are saying that India will never agree to a sort of quasi-alliance, quasi-military alliance or strategic alliance with America. And therefore this would limit the extent to which Trump will strengthen ties with India.
There are two things. One is that this is China's wishful thinking. They've always said that, look, India believed in non-alignment, it believes in strategic autonomy, it has a certain tradition of independent foreign policy, therefore they'll never team up with the United States. But I asked the other question, why is China confronting India so openly now in the NSG, in the UN Security Council, in Pakistan-occupied Kashmir, on our border? They keep protesting on Dalai Lama's visit, now Karmapa's visit. Earlier, when somebody else from our side went to Arunachal Pradesh, If they ease up on these things and become more reasonable and engage us, I think the atmosphere will change altogether. They can't have it both ways. They bully us, they try to intimidate us, right? And then they confront us on very sensitive issues internationally by making it clear that they're going to prevent the rise of India globally and prevent a rise in its stature. Once they do that, then they should be open to the idea that India will look for hedging strategies. So they can't have it both ways.
Do you also agree with the Chinese assessment that what will also limit the intensity or the closeness of US-India ties would be how the US pressures India on issues of its own concern, say example climate change, nuclear proliferation, terrorism. They are arguing that US will pick and choose areas where it wants to pressure India, and India would not like to give in to that kind of pressure because of its own interests.
No, I think
this too would limit the relationship.
But it is totally off the mark, because on climate change, in fact, Prime Minister Modi has followed a very astute policy of warding off pressure by creating this solar alliance and having these massive program of renewable energy and inviting United States and others to come and help India achieve these targets and goals which are good for climate change and which meet the energy needs of India and which changes the energy mix and reduces our reliance on coal. So there is no issue there. On non-proliferation, we have signed the civil nuclear agreement. The United States obtained for us exemption from the NSG. Now Westinghouse is going to set up nuclear power plants in India. So I don't see where this thing comes in. And on terrorism, in fact, we have been moving closer and closer with the United States in terms of appreciating and understanding and mutually supporting ourselves on concerns of terrorism which emanate from the Pak-Af region. So I can't see why the Chinese are focusing on these three issues, because precisely on these three issues we have now a better understanding with the United States of America.
What I hear you saying is that US-India relations are on a different trajectory, an independent trajectory than let's say US-China relations. One doesn't impact the other. Is that the case? Because I don't think that is the case.
I think largely that is the case because as you see, we are also open to China coming and investing in India. And every other day Chinese delegations are here. A couple of days you're going to have a conference between Chinese think tanks and Indian think tanks. So it's not as if the channels of communication have in any case been broken down or have been reduced, because on the economic side we remain open, though there are difficulties. We don't want them to come in.
On the strategic side, we are part of trilateral military exercises with Japan, US, and quadrilateral including Australia.
That is true.
Is China not a factor there at all?
China is a factor. China is a factor, just as China is actually presenting huge strategic problems for us by strengthening ties with Pakistan and intruding into our security periphery in Nepal, in Bangladesh, in Sri Lanka. They can't have it both ways. They have the liberty to do what they want in our region and beyond in international organizations. And India cannot then strengthen its relationship with those countries which have concerns about China. That game is going on. So China is not the victim. China, in fact, has provoked this.
Okay, so my last question to you. So Donald Trump chastising China will not impact in any way on our relationship with the US. It will neither strengthen it nor weaken it.
No, on the contrary. I would say that we should be happy that he's chastising China, and one would be happier if he actually followed up on that, because it's very important to checkmate China's global ambitions and his regional ambitions and his one belt, one road thing and maritime Silk Route, and put pressure on his economy, because China must learn to control its ambitions, because its ambitions are causing a great deal of mistrust all around.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sibal, for talking to us. That is all we have for you today. We'll be back again soon. Until then, goodbye, and thanks for watching Catch News.